Hi everybody, welcome back to the final topic of Unit 2. This is topic 2.7, jerseys, badges, and national crest. And whereas I like all the stuff we're talking about this semester, I'm very interested in this concept of sports and international affairs. I dearly love the way in which jerseys, badges, and national crests are utilized to create a common identity. So it isn't uncommon for teams or for institutions to try and create an identity. That doesn't have to be done at the national level. Certainly at the University of Idaho, we try and create an identity through using common colors, through using a common symbol in either Joe Vandal or the Vandal identity itself. It's common to use sports as a way to do it, but we also do so through colleges and through departments and other clubs and other sorts of gatherings. So it's not unique to nations trying to create a national identity, but it is one where you have the opportunity to craft an identity in the minds of a whole country by using jerseys, badges, and national crests creatively and conscientiously. I'm interested in these. I like to see what countries come out as. I'm also interested in what they wear in opening ceremonies of Olympic Games. So at the opening of any Winter or Summer Olympiad, there's something called the Parade of Nations, which we've looked at a little bit in the past. But this is when countries march in, and many of them turn to fashion designers to design their outfits so they look really sharp or sometimes ridiculous. I don't know. Some of the outfits don't make it. But Hugo Boss or Ralph Lauren or somebody will design a country's outfits that they march in with. But others turn to traditional costumery and traditional cultures to outfit themselves so that they say something about themselves as they walk in. I'm very interested. And so here we go with this specifically about how it plays out in not just soccer jerseys, but with rugby, with hockey, with anything that's worn that's in a country's sports space. So let's start here with the idea of heraldry going back into the European Middle Ages. So this is the coat of arms of Charles V, who was the King of Spain. He was the Habsburg Emperor. He was the Holy Roman Emperor. He had a lot of possessions either through inheritance, through marriage, through conquest, that were part of his domain. And so the badge gets, the crest gets pretty complicated. Each of these stands for a different thing, a different geographic region spanning through much of Europe. Even some overseas possessions by the middle of the 1500s. And they represent Charles. So this starts originally because it's hard to identify knights in battle. They're wearing tin cans unless there's some symbols that they come out with, either through banners or through things tied to their armor. You can't tell, but they also come then to explain I don't know, connections between royal houses. They express grandeur. They're supposed to sort of show what a region is, and this devolves to countries as well. So many European polities, as they coalesce as countries, adopt the heraldry that comes from the old imperial regions as well. So let's look at one. So we're going to look at three concepts in particular that talk about why jerseys are important and relevant. And so let's start with this one. This is the idea that most countries are young. So I want to differentiate between countries and cultures, because one of the things you may find if you travel as an American is that there's a truism. So truism is this idea that people say it so often it must be true, but often isn't. There's a truism that America, the United States of America, is a young country, and it's not true at all. We are a younger culture compared to European people in European countries, but our country is actually much older than almost all of them. That, in fact, the way the countries coalesce often is a 20th century phenomenon in Europe, at least with the current borders and with how things look. That doesn't mean there haven't been people in those regions who might identify, say, as French for a long, long time. But how long has there been a France? About the same amount of time as there's this kind of France, about as long as there's been a United States. How long has there been a Germany? Less, much less. In fact, you might go back into the 1990s to say this is when we have the current Germany. How long has there been a Poland? How long has there been a UK, etc.? The United Kingdom comes from the 1920s. Have there been English for a long time? Yes, absolutely. But the current countries are younger, and that's why they need some symbols to create a common identity. So here, let's introduce the Czech Republic, sometimes now known also as Czechia, depending on what organization you're in. So there's a country called Czechoslovakia that doesn't predate the 20th century. It's a 20th century phenomenon coming out of World War I. It exists through most of the 20th century as a combined national entity. But in the 1990s, they have something that happens where very peacefully the two parts split. And so you have Slovakia and the Czech Republic. And the Czech Republic has an interesting challenge because before they became the Czech Republic, and before that they were Czechoslovakia, there had been no Czechs. There had been people in the region who might identify as Czechs. They had belonged to a country. There had been, for hundreds of years, a Bohemia, a Moravia, and a Silesia, which had their own crests from their own royal houses. And so instead of immediately putting the red, white, and blue colors of the Czech Republic onto jerseys, and have that be their badge, they went out with a badge that represents the historical cultures, the historical polities that encompass the Czech Republic. So here you have the badge, the hockey badge from the 1990s. Ice hockey being one of the things in the Czech sports space. And so you see they've got the Bohemian symbols, the Moravian symbols, and the Silesian symbols. What they're going to try and do is suggest to people in those regions that they now are part of something larger that's the Czech Republic, and that they should identify with that. And that by using the sport in the sports space, namely the soccer team, which also have this badge, and the hockey team, that they can begin to identify themselves that way. Because the flag would still fly, the colors would still be the red, white, and blue, and they begin to identify that way. In fact, in the last 5 to 10 years, they've gone away from this old badge and have a new one that is more of one that represents the modern current Czechia. So that's one. Most countries are young. They have a need to to create an identity. Another challenge for a lot of these young countries is that they're multi-ethnic or even multinational, that there were nations within the borders which then become independent, that existed for time. Many decades, centuries before they became a country. So here's a representation of Ghana. So Ghana's first president of first independent Ghana in 1957 is Kwame Nkrumah. He's on the cover of this Time magazine here, and he's faced with people who had come together to kind of collectively push the English out, the British out as their colonial power. But once they're gone, there's nothing left to create a common Ghanaian identity. In fact, there's more than 90 national and linguistic groups in Ghana. And so they need a symbol. They need something to rally around. And in his case, he constantly uses the symbol of the black star. The black star goes two places, one onto the national flag, and two onto the national soccer jersey. The jersey is, the team is useful because it's drawn from the best players from across the country. That doesn't mean there'll be 90 plus ethnic groups represented, but there'll be a wide swath and probably representatives of a lot of the major groups. He did some other things where he's sending people to be educated in other parts of the country so they get used to going to schools with other people. Anyway, he's very focused on creating a national identity. But the Black Stars, that's the name of the team, the nickname of the team, is one of the main ones. And he sends the Black Stars out on tour around the rest of Africa to try and promote this kind of potential ideal. The idea is that he sees in soccer and in the colors and in the badge and the symbols a way in which to create a national identity out of these 90 plus folks. So we have young countries, we have multi-ethnic countries, and we have some countries that don't have a lot of the presence of the nation. So unless you're part of, there's sort of three tiers of countries in international relations that we talk about. Developed countries would be like the United States, where the standard of living is high, where services are common, where people are connected to the larger society. We have middle income states, which have most of those things present. It's just the standard of living is a little bit lower. And then there's developing and in particularly least developed states, which are quite poor and lack a lot of the things you can read about here on the side. So there's a difference in how a rural community like Moscow, Idaho, which is pictured here on the top, operates versus a rural community in Guatemala. And Guatemala is actually a low middle income, not a least developed country. Some of the least developed countries, you really don't have a functioning highway system. You don't have a functioning postal system, economic system. It's an absence of a lot of the presence of the state. And frankly, when the state shows up, sometimes you're not happy because they're going to bring with it some oppressive things. So, like, how then do you create an identity? How do you begin to build out of it to craft something different as you push forward? So, if none of these things here was present, well, then you're looking to co-opt or to utilize something else that's common to the people. And in many of these places where you have a common sport that's in the sports space, that it spreads differently than the state spreads, that you can have common symbols spread as well. Either because you have the national team's presence, you have a national league that they're part of all the way through that. I think we try to talk about in Unit 1, all the way out through club competitions. The very small rural places can come and compete in national competition. And they'll also be part of the national team, either if they play in, say, Pan-African or Pan-Asian, Pan-European, Pan-American competitions, or even higher levels, that the jersey then becomes important, the symbols. So you've got young countries, you've got multi-ethnic and multinational countries, and you've got countries that are, they're just so remote that lack a national presence that these sort of symbols matter. So those will be your three general reasons why it matters. And you don't need all three to be present. For example, the idea that there's an England, we've looked at in Unit 1, there's only an England in certain sports. There is no England otherwise. That means the symbols on the jerseys of the three lions becomes important, right? It becomes important as part of an English national identity that's not part of the British or the UK national identity. Some states are also trying to express territorial specific messages. So you might recognize the one there on the right, because that's the one I'm wearing today. A little bit different elephant on this one, but it's the badge of the Ivory Coast. So this goes back to a part of what we looked at in the course introduction when I had you watch a video of Didier Drogba and his mates stopping a civil war. This is a country that often threatens to fracture. So when they go out as a national team and people in both parts or all parts of the Ivory Coast identify with this national team, the badge isn't shaped traditionally as a circle or as a shield. It's shaped as the outline of the country to remind them when the national team is out there that they have something in common and it's invested in the team. Similar to that would be Trinidad and Tobago. It's a two-island it's a dyad in the Caribbean, and as you can see from the badge, one is much smaller than the other, and much of the development and much of the opportunities lies on one. So they do emphasize that both are part. Bosnia and Herzegovina is another one that uses the shape of the country on it. It's both an internal messaging and external to the Serbs and to others, particularly the Serbs and even the Croats, who share the Balkan Peninsula with them. And were part of the former Yugoslavia, and that territorial integrity is important to them. So they're going to they're going to send a message that's specific about the territory there. But even a place like Spain today, so we started way at the beginning of this lecture with this, which was Charles V, who was the King of Spain, the Habsburgs, and the Holy Roman Emperor. Several of these symbols are present still on the Spanish badge. So the Spanish badge has been the one here on the left. The same symbols are now in the one on the right. That's the new one for the Spanish Soccer Federation. It's being debuted here in 2022. Same idea, different coloring and stuff, a little modernizing and streamlining. But if you read at the bottom, it's a representation. Each part of the shield represents part of the country that is unified under the crown of Spain. So this crown up here is the crown of Spain. And so it's unified there. The star represents a World Cup victory that they had. Spain won the tournament in 2010. It won the European tournament in 2008, 2012. It's a really significant run of success. But there, as we mentioned earlier in this unit, and we'll mention again in future units, there are a lot of parts of Spain that aren't sure they want to be parts of Spain. And so the Spanish nation itself has an interest in reminding people that they have something that they do in common and that they're good at, and that if they stick together, they can be successful. So all of those regions are represented on the badge of the soccer jersey. RFEF is just the Spanish Soccer Federation. That's what that stands for. And 1909 is when the Soccer Federation was founded. But all the other things have a meaning. And I think the coolest one is the Pillars of Hercules on the outside. You can see them resting on the ocean, this symbol here. Different crowns. That's the Straits of Gibraltar. Very interesting to me because they don't own or control the Straits of Gibraltar right now, but they would like to. I think we mentioned that maybe way back in topic 1-2 about the UK and how Gibraltar functions in all of this. But that's the idea. So there are a myriad other sorts of symbols and things that go out on jerseys. Now, not all of them are to create a national identity. So in the United States, the Nike and the U.S. Soccer Federation, they sometimes come up with symbols on the jersey, not to convince us that we're Americans, but to to get us to identify as soccer fans, like to think it's cool. So the snake and don't tread on me and stuff. We're not trying to tell us we're Americans. It's trying to create identity as fans. But in a lot of other cases, it's that attempt to create nationalism through jerseys, badges, crests, colors. It's important and it matters. We got some readings for you to help understand this a little bit better. But I'm always happy to chat about it.